If you really understood my last video titled 1950s Throwback Hunt, you know that that video was less about hunting and more about comparing 1950s hunting technology to today's hunting technology. One of the only real issues I had on that hunt was the old school fine crosshair reticle and that Weaver K6 scope that I was using. On a big black boar like the one I shot, or through dark spots in vegetation, that reticle would almost completely disappear on me. Also, that fine crosshair reticle really didn't draw my eyes quickly onto the target. I made about a 50-yard shot on that big boar I shot in the video, but I had to really take my time and carefully find the aiming point within that reticle. But I've always loved and preferred the duplex reticle for hunting. But that hunt really cemented the advantages that the duplex reticle offers. In this video, I'll discuss the history and the usefulness of the greatest multi-purpose hunting reticle of all time, the duplex reticle. Although optical reticles date back hundreds of years for astronomical and surveying equipment, rifle scopes became mainstream as a result of the American Civil War. That brutal war pushed both sides of the conflict to achieve a tactical advantage, and the rifle scope was used to great effect. In fact, the highest ranking officer to die in that conflict was killed by a sharpshooter with a scope at 800 yards. Several American scope manufacturers supplied the Union, and Whitworth of England supplied most of the Confederate sharpshooter scopes for that war. Most scopes of the era had super fine crosshairs, mainly because the crosshairs were constructed of hair, fine wire, or the silk of the brown recluse spider. That's right, early scope manufacturers were collecting the silk from brown recluse spiders to make reticles. After World War I, rifle scopes became available to recreational hunters. These scopes use post-style, dot, or fine crosshair reticles. The post-style reticle was quick to the target and made tracking moving targets easier, and the fine crosshair reticle provided extreme precision. Even though Leupold and Weaver were revolutionizing the scope industry in the late 40s and throughout the 1950s, in those days, hunters still only had a choice between a post reticle that was quick but not precise and a fine crosshair reticle that was precise but not quick and easily readable. The German number 4 reticle existed at the time, but those German scopes were 5 times more expensive than an American scope, really hard to get, and were almost impossible to mount on some American rifles. Then in 1962, Leupold invented the duplex reticle, and hunters were graced with probably the best hunting reticle ever made. Today, every scope manufacturer in the world has a copy of the duplex reticle. If it has the word plex in its name, it's probably a modified copy of the duplex reticle. 60 years after its invention, the duplex reticle is the best-selling scope reticle in the hunting world today. So what makes the duplex reticle so great? To the new hunter, the duplex reticle might seem plain and featureless, but experienced hunters know that's exactly what makes it so great. Hunters that actually stalk their prey can't have a busy reticle packed with so many lines and numbers that's hard to focus on the animal for a quick shot. Hunters also prefer a second focal plane scope and hunt with a scope on low power, so all those extra lines and numbers are completely meaningless and just get in the way. But the greatest feature of the duplex reticle is how the heavier outer lines
transition into finer lines in the middle. And this naturally pulls your eyes into the center of the reticle without even thinking about it. And naturally, that makes for quicker target acquisition and faster shots. But the thinner crosshairs in the middle also allow the hunter to take a highly precise shot when you need to. Leupold's Duplex has thick lines that aren't too thick, like the German reticles were, and that might block part of your view. And the thin lines weren't too thin, where they're hard or almost impossible to see in low light or against a wooded background. It's just the perfect reticle for hunting.
The duplex reticle can also be used for ranging targets. The space between the center of the reticle and the thick portion is known as subtension, and this can be used to range an animal or object of known size. Just be mindful that subtension values are different between scope models and power settings, so you really have to know your scope to use this feature. But once you figure out how to range with the duplex on your particular scope, it's pretty easy. But honestly, if I have time to range in my reticle, I also have time to use my rangefinder.
But let's be real. Most hunters zero their rifle at the maximum point blank range for hits within a predetermined target radius. And, or they simply zero their hunting rifles at 200 yards and keep their shots under 300 yards. Honestly, I hunt all over the West and in other countries, and I haven't had to shoot a game animal at over 250 yards in about 10 years. If you spot and stalk, still hunt from a stand, the plain old duplex reticle is all you're ever going to need. But the duplex reticle has also evolved over the last 60 years into many different forms. The folks that shoot animals at longer distances, let's say the edge of being ethical at about 500 yards, when they do this, windage really comes into play. And the loads I usually hunt with are going to have wind drift issues past 300 yards probably. So you have to deal with that. Most folks like to dial elevation on the turret and hold for windage inside the reticle. Well, there's a great duplex reticle for that too. It's called the wind-plex reticle.
The wind-plex reticle gives you most of the advantages of a standard duplex reticle, but lets you do wind holds in 1 MOA subtensions for those longer shots. For the ethical hunter, this is probably at the upper end of what you need in a reticle. I use this reticle on my predator hunting rifles, but find it too busy and not as fast as the standard duplex when hunting deer or pigs. But if you insist on hunting at distances where wind can cause you to miss with your cartridge, this is a great reticle.
The duplex reticle just draws your eyes in for quick target acquisition, but has a fine enough crosshair center section to take a very precise shot on game animals. The lines on the outside of the cross are thick enough to where you could see them really good in low light or against dark backgrounds, but they're not so thick that they block details that the hunter wants to see through a scope. It also doesn't clutter your field of view, yet it gives you all the information you need from a reticle. From a hunting standpoint, the duplex reticle is the perfect reticle. It truly does it all. But the duplex reticle has evolved with the times and enjoys countless tweaks to the design by different manufacturers in order to customize it to different tastes. You now have fine duplexes, thick duplexes, ballistic plexes, wind plexes, dot plexes, target plexes, and countless other duplex variations on the market. The duplex is the #1 hunting reticle in the world for a reason, because it works without compromise. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video about my favorite hunting reticle. You can contact me with any questions or comments at desertdogoutdoors@gmail.com. As always, thanks for watching and good hunting.